Revenge office stories. After 10 years of loyal service, after building their compliance department from the ground up, I was fired, and then I was blacklisted. What was my crime? I found out the company I worked for, a firm that sold itself as a shield for small businesses, was actually running a massive, predatory government compliance scam. They thought an NDA and a threat to my reputation would be enough to silence me. They thought I'd just disappear. Instead, I decided to take the whole thing down. This is the story of how I got my revenge. Not with rage, but with receipts. It all started with a phone call. Not some dramatic, movie-style call, but a confused one. A woman named Maria, who ran a tiny floral shop in a town you've never heard of, called our support line. I was the head of compliance assurance at a company we'll call Guardian Compliance Solutions. And every so often, I'd listen in on calls to get a feel for what our customers were going through. Maria was frantic. She'd received a letter, a final notice, screaming in red ink. It looked terrifyingly official, complete with a governmental-looking seal and a notice ID number. The letter claimed she'd failed to file her beneficial ownership information, a real requirement under the Transparency Act, and that penalties were piling up at $591 a day. It threatened to dissolve her business. It even mentioned jail time. Maria was on the verge of tears. She had just paid us, Guardian Compliance, $600 for our total compliance package, which was supposed to handle all of this for her. So why was she getting this notice? I told her it was probably a mistake and that I'd look into it myself. I pulled her file. We had all her info, business registration, tax ID, everything. Our system showed her status as compliant. I told my team to flag it as a likely third-party scam and to reassure her. But something felt off. The name on the letter, the United States Business Regulations Department, sounded official, but generic. It was an entity that I, a compliance professional with a decade of experience, had never even heard of. Just to be safe, I had my assistant log the details of the letter. It was a small act of diligence, just a courtesy. I had no idea I had just logged the first piece of evidence in a case that would turn my life upside down and destroy the company I'd helped build. To really get the betrayal, you have to understand my loyalty. I'm a 39-year-old compliance officer. It's not a glamorous job. We're the back office people who actually read the fine print, the ones making sure the company flies straight. And I believed in it. I believed that by helping small businesses stay compliant, we were helping them succeed. The big corporations have armies of lawyers. The little guys, the florists, the bakers, the mechanics, they had us. At least that was the pitch. Our CEO, a man we'll call Richard Davis, was the face of the company. He was charismatic, gave keynote speeches about corporate integrity, and wrote blog posts about empowering entrepreneurs. Everyone, myself included, bought into his vision. For 10 years, I built his compliance frameworks, his risk protocols, his training modules. I was meticulous, and my performance reviews were always flawless. I wasn't just an employee, I was a true believer. A week after Maria's call, another one came in, and then another. The stories were all the same. Small business owners, all Guardian clients, all terrified by nearly identical letters from the United States Business Regulations Department, or the Department of Records Management. Every letter used fear to demand payment for some bogus filing. The pattern was too clean, too perfect to be a coincidence. I started a private folder on my personal drive off the company servers. I named it Anomalies. I logged every panicked call, every threatening letter, and then I noticed something chilling. The scam letters weren't random at all. They always arrived 4 to 6 weeks after a new client signed up for our most expensive service, the Total Compliance Package. That package was my division's flagship product. I designed its workflows myself. The scammers seemed to know the exact moment our clients had just spent a lot of money for peace of mind, which made them incredibly vulnerable to another threat. They also knew public record data like the client's business ID numbers and formation dates, which made the letters feel real. It was unsettling, but I figured it had to be a data breach. A serious crisis, but an explainable one. I put together a preliminary report for Richard, laid out my findings, and recommended we hire a cybersecurity firm to investigate. I felt a sense of dread, but also purpose. This was my job. Find the problem, fix the problem. I scheduled a meeting and walked into Richard's glass-walled office, report in hand. He was on the phone, laughing, and waved me in. When he hung up, he leaned back in his chair, beaming. "Sarah, my rock star, what fire are you putting out for me today?" I didn't smile back. I laid the report on his desk. "Richard, I think we have a serious problem. I believe our client database has been breached. Clients are being targeted by a sophisticated scam, and attackers have information that points to an internal leak." He picked up the report, his smile vanishing as he scanned the first page. He flipped through the call logs and the pictures of the letters. I expected him to be shocked or concerned. Instead, I saw a flicker of irritation in his eyes. He was annoyed. He tossed the report back on the desk. "Sarah, you know how many phishing scams are out there. These small business owners, they're not always the most tech-savvy. They click on everything." "This is different, Richard," I said, my voice firm. "The timing is too precise. They're using the Corporate Transparency Act, real legislation, to create panic. This isn't some generic email scam. This is targeted." He got up and walked to the window, turning his back to me. "We are a compliance company. The optics of a data breach are catastrophic. We can't go there. Just handle it internally. Send a memo to our clients, reminding them to be vigilant." That's it. My stomach dropped. A memo? We have a responsibility to these people. They're paying us to protect them. If our systems are compromised, we are legally and ethically obligated to investigate and inform them. He turned around, the charismatic mask on. His face was cold. "Your job, Sarah, is to manage our compliance, not invent new liabilities. You're overreacting. This is a distraction from our Q3 growth targets. Drop it." I was stunned. It felt like a physical blow. For a decade, my by-the-book approach was praised. Now it was an inconvenience. But this was more than a disagreement. This was fundamentally wrong. His refusal to investigate, his blatant disregard for our clients. It went against everything I thought we stood for. I left his office with my mind racing. He wasn't just being negligent. He was actively shutting me down. Why? And a cold thought started to form in my gut. What if it wasn't a leak? I couldn't let it go. I started digging again, but this time I was quiet about it. I used the administrative access Richard himself had given me to look into things I wasn't supposed to see. I started with the workflow for the total compliance package. I found a new subroutine I hadn't created, added about 6 months ago by a developer who reported directly to Richard. It was labeled External Marketing Integration. Every Friday, it exported a specific chunk of new client data, name, business address, and the date they bought the package, to an external FTP server I didn't recognize. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a leak. It was a planned, automated handoff. We weren't being hacked. We were giving the data away. Next, I looked into our vendor payments. And there it was, a monthly payment of $10,000 to a shell corporation I'd never heard of, Marketing Data Strategies, LLC. The invoices were vague, just citing lead generation services. Using a public record search, I found the registered agent for the LLC. It was Richard's brother-in-law. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. There was no data breach. Richard was selling our client data to a scam operation run by his own family that was using our name to terrorize and extort people. The total compliance package wasn't just a service. It was a lead gen tool for a fraud scheme. We weren't the shield. We were the sword. I felt sick. The company I had dedicated my life to was a lie. I knew going back to Richard was useless. He was the architect. So I did what my training had taught me to do. I went up the chain. I put together a new, much more detailed report with the FTP logs, the payment records, everything. I scheduled a meeting with our chief operating officer and our general counsel. This time I was ready for a fight, but I wasn't ready for what actually happened. I was in my office, double-checking my documents, when an urgent meeting request from HR popped up. In 5 minutes, my heart pounded. I walked into the conference room. Richard was there with the head of HR. The COO and general counsel were not. Richard wouldn't even look at me. The HR director, a woman I'd hired years ago, slid a thick folder across the table. Her voice was flat, robotic. "Sarah, we're terminating your employment, effective immediately. There have been complaints about your abrasive management style and a recent lapse in judgment regarding client data." I just stared at her, then at Richard. Abrasive? A lapse in judgment? I was trying to report a massive criminal fraud operation being run out of this very office. Richard finally looked at me, a smug, pitying smile on his face. "You were becoming a liability, Sarah, creating panic, damaging morale. The board has lost confidence in you." "The board?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You are the board, Richard. This is just you, covering your tracks." The HR director pushed the folder closer. "This is your separation agreement. It includes a standard, but very comprehensive non-disclosure clause. If you sign, you'll get a generous severance. If you don't, we'll be forced to file a report about your mishandling of sensitive company data. I can assure you, you will not work in this industry again." It wasn't just firing me. It was a threat. They were blacklisting me, using my own dedication to compliance as a weapon to ruin my reputation. I stood up. I didn't even look at the folder. I looked right at Richard, my voice cold and calm. "You think you can erase me? You think a piece of paper and a threat will make this go away? You have made a terrible mistake." He just chuckled. "The only mistake was thinking you were a team player. Security will escort you out." Walking back to my desk with a security guard hovering over me, I saw my team's faces. They wouldn't meet my eyes. They knew something was deeply wrong, but fear kept them quiet. They watched as I packed 10 years of my life into a small cardboard box. As I walked out of that building for the last time, humiliated and betrayed, the anger finally hit. But it wasn't a hot, blinding rage. It was a cold, quiet, and deeply patient fury. Richard thought he had silenced me. He thought I was broken. He was wrong. He hadn't broken me. He had focused me. At that moment, I made a vow. I wasn't just going to get a new job. I was going to get justice. And I was going to burn his entire scam to the ground. The first few weeks were a blur. The blacklisting was real and brutally effective. Recruiters who had been courting me for months suddenly went dark. My calls weren't returned. In a small industry, a whisper from a CEO like Richard was a death sentence. The story he was spinning, that I'd become paranoid and unstable, was the perfect corporate assassination. Plausible, hard to disprove, and utterly devastating. For a while I spiraled. The injustice of it was a physical weight. But then one evening, about a month after I was fired, I was staring at a mountain of bills, thinking about the severance I'd refused to sign. I felt myself sinking. And then I thought of Maria, the florist. I thought of all the other small business owners, terrified and draining their accounts to pay a phantom government agency. They were being victimized twice. That's when the anger came roaring back. But this time it was clean. It was fuel. My revenge wouldn't be emotional. It would be methodical. It would be, in a word, compliant. I was going to use the very skills Richard had paid me to perfect and turn them against him. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was an investigator. My apartment became my war room. I bought a new laptop and a burner phone. I started by creating a timeline, documenting everything from memory. But memories weren't enough. I needed hard, irrefutable proof. They had wiped my computer and deleted my accounts, thinking they'd erased everything. But they'd made one critical mistake. They forgot that I'm the one who built the system from the ground up. I knew its flaws. I knew where the bodies were buried because I had helped design the cemetery. Years ago, I had implemented an old, clunky, off-site backup protocol for disaster recovery. Richard had always refused to pay for an upgrade. That penny pinching was about to be his undoing. While they had deleted my main account, they had likely forgotten about the deep archival server. It wasn't on the main network. You needed a specific IP address and legacy credentials. My credentials. My hands were shaking as I typed in the IP address. A simple login prompt appeared. I entered my old username and a password I hadn't used in 5 years. Denied. My heart sank. But I tried again, thinking through the old protocols. There was a fail-safe admin password, a backdoor for emergencies, based on the company's founding date. I typed it in. The screen flickered, and I was in. It was all there. A digital ghost of my entire career. Every email, every report, every system log. For the next 2 weeks, I barely slept. I downloaded terabytes of data, organized it, and built a fortress of evidence. I found my original emails to Richard about the scam letters and his dismissive replies. I found the developer's notes on the data exporting subroutine. Per RD directive, export client data to external partner FTP. Credentials provided separately. RD, Richard Davis. The smoking gun was in the financial archives. I found the full payment history to Marketing Data Strategies, LLC. But then I found something even better, the original contract proposal. In the metadata of the Word document, the author was listed as Richard Davis. He wrote the contract himself before sending it to his brother-in-law to set up the shell company. Now I needed to connect the company to the victims. I created a fake profile on a small business forum as a worried bookkeeper. I posted a thread. Has anyone received a scary-looking notice from the U.S. Business Regulations Department? The response was a flood. Dozens of business owners replied, and over half of them mentioned they were Guardian compliance clients. I collected their stories, letters, and receipts. I was building an army of victim testimonials. I knew Richard's arrogance was his biggest vulnerability. I made another fake profile, this time as a recruiter, and connected with the developer who built the data exporting tool. I baited him with a fake senior role and a huge salary. He took the bait. In our chat, I praised his work on data integration partnerships. His ego swelled and he bragged, "Yeah, I built the pipeline that monetizes our user data. It's a huge revenue driver." The old guard in compliance, he wrote with a laughing emoji, had no idea how to leverage our assets. I screenshotted everything. He had just confessed in writing to building the tool and confirmed I was deliberately kept in the dark. I had it all: the corporate malfeasance, the financial trail, the victim impact statements, and a confession. Now, how to use it? A press story could be spun. A lawsuit would take years. No, this kind of fraud, impersonating a government agency, wire fraud, this was a matter for federal authorities. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, is a bureau of the Treasury Department that deals with this exact stuff. The FTC also investigates these impersonation scams. An anonymous tip wasn't enough. I needed to deliver a package so complete, so perfectly organized, they couldn't possibly ignore it. I spent a week compiling everything into a comprehensive whistleblower report. It was structured like a legal brief, with an executive summary, table of contents, and sections for the scam mechanics, the corporate complicity, the financial trail, and victim testimonials. I put all the raw data onto a single, encrypted USB drive. I labeled it Guardian Angel. The investigation was over. It was time for the takedown. My attack had to be as strategic as my investigation. Richard had humiliated me publicly. His downfall needed to be just as visible. Guardian held a quarterly all-hands meeting, a big show where Richard would get on stage and trumpet their growth for employees and investors on a live stream. The next one was in 3 weeks. That would be my stage. I drafted 2 separate, meticulously crafted emails. The first was to the whistleblower office of the SEC, since Richard was reporting fraudulent revenue to investors, a clear case of securities fraud. The second went to the FTC and FinCEN, detailing the wire fraud and impersonation scam. The emails were short, professional, and pointed to my full report in a secure, anonymous cloud server. I also identified a top investigative reporter and planned to send an anonymous tip at the exact same time. You might want to ask Guardian Compliance Solutions about Marketing Data Strategies, LLC. Just enough to light the fuse. The day of the all-hands meeting arrived. I sat in a coffee shop miles away, my burner laptop open, watching the public live stream. At 10 a.m., Richard walked on stage to thunderous applause, looking like the king of his castle. He launched into his speech, bragging about their mission-driven growth. He put up a slide showing a 40% year-over-year revenue increase. This is a testament to our team's unwavering commitment to protecting small businesses, he declared. I felt sick watching him celebrate the profits from his scam. I let him talk for another 10 minutes. Then, at exactly 10:15 a.m., I sent the emails. One to the SEC, one to the FTC and FinCEN, and one to the journalist. Click, click, click. For a moment, nothing happened. Richard was still on stage, pontificating about integrity. I just sat there, my heart hammering, waiting for the explosion. The first crack in the dam appeared in just 45 minutes. Richard was in the Q&A session when I saw one of the company's lawyers in the front row look at her phone. Her eyes went wide. She frantically typed a message. A moment later, the CFO, sitting on stage next to Richard, checked his own phone. His smile froze. He leaned over and whispered something to Richard, who just brushed him off. But then more phones started lighting up. A murmur spread through the room. On the live stream, you could see the shift as people started looking at their screens instead of the stage. Richard, sensing he was losing the room, tried to make a joke. "Must be a big news day," he said with a nervous laugh. He had no idea. The reporter I tipped was fast. At 11:02 a.m., the headline broke. Guardian Compliance Solutions under investigation for alleged fraud scheme targeting small businesses. The story was short, but it had the shell company's name. The CFO abruptly stood up and walked off stage. The event was unraveling in real time. Richard's face, projected on the giant screens, shifted from confusion to pure panic. He stammered, trying to regain control, but it was too late. The live stream was abruptly cut. The screen went black. I closed my laptop, paid for my coffee, and walked out into the sunshine. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt quiet. The bomb had gone off. The fallout was just beginning. The aftermath was catastrophic for Guardian. The journalist story, combined with the SEC and FTC's official no comment, acted like gasoline on a fire. The company's value evaporated overnight. Investors who had been cheering Richard's fake revenue numbers were now facing a total loss. Armed with my perfectly organized report, federal investigators didn't just knock. They executed a search warrant the very next day. The office was sealed. It was a crime scene. Richard Davis was fired. Months later, he was indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. His brother-in-law was charged with obstruction of justice. The developer who bragged to me became a cooperating witness. The entire C-suite was dismantled. Guardian Compliance Solutions ceased to exist within the year, its assets liquidated to pay a fraction of the fines and legal fees. The court set up a restitution fund for the thousands of small business owners who had been scammed. Maria, the florist, got her money back. And me? I watched it all from a distance. As a protected whistleblower, my name was never mentioned. To the world, I was just another employee who lost their job. But in the industry, the real story spread through back channels. I wasn't the unstable one anymore. I was the compliance officer who took down Richard Davis. My reputation wasn't just restored. It was forged into something stronger. I didn't take any of the corporate job offers that came my way. Instead, I used a portion of the whistleblower award I was eventually granted by the government to start a small, nonprofit consultancy. I now work directly with small business owners, teaching them how to spot these compliance scams. I help them understand that you never have to pay a fee to file a beneficial ownership information report directly with FinCEN, and that legitimate government websites in the U.S. will always end in .gov. The real revenge wasn't watching Richard's downfall, though I admit there was a grim satisfaction in it. The true vindication was dismantling the machine he built and using the pieces to build something better. He blacklisted me to protect his scam, so I exposed the scam to reclaim my name. They tried to bury me, but they didn't realize they had planted a seed. The fight against these predatory scams is far from over. They count on people feeling scared and alone. If you're a small business owner, or you know one, please share this story. And if you believe in fighting back against the powerful with facts and integrity, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where the truth comes out. Let me know in the comments, was the revenge justified,